Hello, my name is Ryan Linton, and I played Jack Worthing in this production of The Importance of Being Earnest. One CHS Players production that was just started this year is the painting and signing of a brick for each show inside our theater box office. However, during this time, we could not go in and physically sign and paint a brick. However, we did make a virtual brick and signed it via Google Docs. This is what we came up with. We feel that it is good to keep this tradition alive because it is important during this time to keep some sense of normalcy and give our actors and crew members something fun to do. Thank you for viewing and supporting our production. Now, without further ado, here is Act 2 of The Importance of Being Earnest.
Garden at the Manor House. A flight of grey stone steps leads up to the house. The garden, an old-fashioned one full of roses. Time of year, July. Basket chairs and a table, covered with books, are set under a large yew tree. Miss Prism discovered seated at the table. Cecily is at the back watering flowers.
Cecily, surely a utilitarian occupation as the watering of the flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray it open at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
Cecily comes over very slowly.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German, as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious I think he cannot be quite well.
Miss Prism draws herself up.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and the triviality would be out of place in this conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know German and geology and many things of that kind influence a man very much.
Cecily begins to write in her diary.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I'm not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are! I hope it is not unhappily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, and the bad unhappily. That's what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript unfortunately was abandoned.
Cecily starts.
I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Miss Prism rises and advances to meet him.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning, Miss Prism? You are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I've not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that. And not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips.
Miss Prism glares.
I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet?
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sunday in London. He's not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as, by all accounts, that unfortunate young man whose brother seems to be. But I must not disturb Aguria and her pupil any longer.
Aguria, my name is Latia, Doctor.
Dr. Chasuble bows.
A classical allusion merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Goes down the garden with Dr. Chasuble. Cecily picks up her books and throws them back on the table.
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography. Horrid German.
Enter Merriman with a card on a plate.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Cecily takes the card and reads it.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany, W. Uncle Jack's brother? Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed, and I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said that he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. I suppose you had better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him?
Yes, miss.
Merriman goes off.
I have never really met any wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I am so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does.
Algernon raising his hat.
You are Jack's dear little Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I am more than unusually tall for my age.
Algernon is rather taken aback.
But I am Jack Cecily. You see, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother Ernest, his wicked brother Ernest.
Oh, I am not really wicked at all. Unusually tall, Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope that you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and then being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Algernon looks at her in amazement.
Oh, of course I have been rather reckless.
I am glad to hear it, but I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know how important it is not to keep a business engagement, but if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But I still think you had better wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He has gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly won't let Jack buy my outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, the accounts I've received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
How thoughtless of me! I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
Markle Neal?
She picks up scissors.
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
She cuts a flower.
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it could be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady.
Cecily puts the rose in his buttonhole.
You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
Both pass into the house. Miss Prism and Dr. Chasuble return.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was distinctly against matrimony.
And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This is very celibacy leads to weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No man is ever attractive except to his wife. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools?
Enter Jack slowly from the back of the garden. He is dressed in the deepest mourning with crepe hatband and black gloves.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
Jack shakes Miss Prism's hand in a tragic manner.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chastable, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance?
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother Ernest, dead?
Quite dead.
Oh, what a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you are always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad. In Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Chasuble raises his hand.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us here are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to droughts. Will the internment take place here?
No. No. He seems to have expressed a desire to be buried
In Paris?
He shakes his head.
I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday.
Jack presses his hand convulsively.
My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful or, as in the present tense, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation, and festival days. The last time I delivered it was in the cathedral, as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the Upper Orders. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
Ah, that reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chastable. I suppose you know how to christen.
Dr. Chasuble looks astounded.
I mean, of course, you are continually christening, are you not?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken to the classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself, this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already?
I don't remember a thing about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you any, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling, and indeed the immersion of adults, is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed, I think, advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot around about 5, if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. In fact, I have two similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred recently in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins Zacata, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened along with the other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably.
He takes out his watch.
And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed by your grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Enter Cecily from the house.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I am pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you have on. Do go and change them.
Cecily?
My child, my child.
Cecily goes towards Jack. He kisses her brow in a melancholy manner.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you had toothache. I have such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out. And you will shake hands with him. Won't you, Uncle Jack?
Runs back into the house.
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me particularly distressing.
My brother in the dining room? I don't know what it all means. Oh, I think it's perfectly absurd.
Enter Algernon and Cecily hand in hand. They come slowly up to Jack.
Good heavens!
He motions Algernon away.
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Jack glares at him and does not take his hand.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here is disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor ill friend Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an ill man, and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, and he's told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury in his terrible state of health.
Bunbury. Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or anything else. It is enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side, but I must say that I think Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it is the first time I have come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, ever, ever.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
He shakes with Algernon and glares.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
They all go off except Jack and Algernon.
You young scoundrel, Algy, must get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow Bunburying here.
Enter Merriman.
I've put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cut at once. Mr. Ernest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
She goes back into the house.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying for a whole week with you in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You have got to leave. By the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave so long as you are in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should think it's very unkind if you don't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you are not too long. I never saw anybody take so long to dress, and with such little result.
Well, at any rate, it is better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I'm occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by always being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4:05 train, and I hope you will have a pleasant journey back to town. This bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
Jack goes into the house.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything.
Enter Cecily at the back of the garden. She picks up the can and begins to water the flowers.
But I must see her before I go and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's going to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I am afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
Enter Merriman.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
Algernon looks appealingly at Cecily.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
Exit Merriman.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I say quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
She goes over to the table and begins writing in her diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
Oh, no.
She puts her hand over it.
You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from a dictation. I have released absolute perfection. You can go on. I am quite ready for more.
Somewhat taken aback.
Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think that you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily!
Enter Merriman.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week, at the same hour.
Merriman looks at Cecily, who makes no sign.
Yes, sir.
Merriman retires.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week, at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care for anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we've been engaged for the past 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling! And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or another. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name, and a little bangle. This is the little bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you I'd always wear.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's an excuse I've always given for your leading such a bad life. This is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
Kneels at table, opens box, and produces letters tied up with blue ribbon.
My letters? But, my own sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. That would make you far too conceited.
She replaces the box.
The 3 you wrote me after I had broken off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like.
Shows him the diary.
Today, I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I am very much hurt indeed to hear you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
Algernon crosses to her, kneeling.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy.
He kisses her. She puts her fingers through his hair.
I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
Yes, darling, with a little help from others.
I am so glad.
You will never break off our engagement again, Cecily.
I don't think I could break it off now that I have actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but it has always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Ernest.
Algernon rises, Cecily also.
There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
But, my dear child, do you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my own dear, sweet, loving darling, I really can't see why you should object to the name of Algernon, which is not a bad name at all. In fact, it is a rather aristocratic name. Half of the chaps who get into the bankruptcy courts are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily,
He moves to her.
if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
She rises.
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I feel I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily,
He picks his hat.
your rector is here. I suppose thoroughly experienced in the practice of old rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh, yes. Dr. Chowsbury is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on a most important christening. I mean, on most important business.
Oh,
I shan't be away more than half an hour.
considering that we have been engaged since February the 14th, and that I only met you today for the first time, I think it is rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
He kisses her and rushes down the garden.
What an impudent boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal in my diary.
Enter Merriman.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing. On very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in the library?
Mr. Worthing went in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
She goes out.
Miss Fairfax, I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack in some of his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
Enter Merriman.
Miss Fairfax.
Enter Jack. Gwendolyn catches sight of him.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolyn, darling.
He offers to kiss her. Gwendolyn draws back.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
She points to Cecily.
Dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
She offers her cheek, which Jack kisses.
I knew there must be some understanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Oh!
Enter Algernon.
Here is Ernest.
Algernon goes straight over to Cecily, without noticing anyone else.
My own love.
Offers to kiss her. Cecily draws back.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
What young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Yes, to, good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you.
She presents her cheek to be kissed.
You may.
Algernon kisses her.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Cecily breaks away from Algernon.
Algernon Moncrief. Ugh.
The two girls move towards each other and put their arms around each other's waists as if for protection.
Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Ugh.
Is your name really John?
Jack stands rather proudly.
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
Cecily turns to Gwendolyn.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet, wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
They embrace. Jack and Algernon groan and walk up and down.
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I have ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I am really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I have never had a brother in my life, and I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all.
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl suddenly to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
They retire into the house with scornful looks.
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose?
Yes, and perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I have ever had in my life.
Well, you have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has the right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburys? Good heavens.
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunburying. What on earth are you so serious about? I haven't got the remotest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to, dear Algy, and a very good thing, too.
Your brother's a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? He won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say that your taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defence at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn, that is all. I love her.
I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is certainly no chance of you marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it.
He begins to eat muffins.
It's very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that. And then merely as dinner parties.
How can you sit there, calmly eating muffins, when we are in this horrible trouble? You seem to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all, under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
He rises. Jack rises to match Algernon.
Well, there is no reason you should eat them all in that greedy way.
He takes muffins from Algernon. Algernon offers Jack tea cake.
I wish you would have tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens! I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden?
But you have just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you, under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
He seizes the muffin dish from Jack.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. It's absurd. I never go without my dinner. No one ever does except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Ernest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chastable to be christened myself at 5:30, and I naturally would take the name of Ernest. Gwendon would wish it. We can't both be christened Ernest. It's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence at all that I have ever been christened by anybody. I should think it extremely probable I never was. And so does Dr. Chastable. It's entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I have not been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you are not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. This might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this weekend by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said yourself that a severe chill was not hereditary.
It usedn't to be. I know, but I dare say it now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
Jack picks up the muffin dish.
Oh, that is nonsense. You are always talking nonsense.
Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left.
He takes them.
I told you I was particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake.
Why on earth, then, do you allow tea cake to be served for your guests? What ideas do you have of hospitality?
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I do not want you here. Why won't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet, and there's only 1 muffin left.
Jack sinks into his chair whilst Algernon continues eating.